Greetings again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of OSI Today, the podcast featuring news and views from around the Office of Special Investigations. I'm Wayne Amon from OSI Public Affairs, and in this edition, we continue our special series, My OSI Journey, which showcases the diversity and inclusion of our command-wide members. And today, I'm so very pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Tasha Vick, Commander of the 12th Field Investigations Squadron at Buckley Space Force Base, Colorado. Colonel Vick, welcome to the program. So great to have you with us.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Now, in checking your biography before we went on the air today, I noticed that you got a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology with an emphasis in law and criminal behavior from California Lutheran University back in 2003. Now, that leads me into my first question. Is that when and how you originally became interested in law enforcement and then subsequently OSI?
Yes, it is, actually. So out of high school, I had an Air Force ROTC scholarship. Both of my parents had been in the Army, and actually both of my brothers had gotten Army ROTC scholarships. But me being the baby and the girl, I was encouraged to apply for the Air Force. And so I was lucky enough to get a scholarship for psychology. That was back when you had to declare your major to get the scholarship. Uh-huh. And I think I just barely snuck in before you had to have like an engineering degree to get any sort of ROTC scholarship.
So you made it under the wire. That's great.
That's right. I think everybody kind of says that as they get older. It's like, I'm not sure I would have made it, the next time. Right. So,
right.
I loved psychology in high school, and I was a gymnast. And so actually what I was doing is I was coaching gymnastics on the side while I was in college. Uh-huh. But ROTC scheduled a career day. And during that career day, actually one of our former ROTC cadets had become an OSI agent, and she was at Edwards, and she came back for career day. Uh-huh. And as I was kind of going through, the different jobs that psychology might kind of, fit with and everything, OSI was the one that stood out for me. I decided, no, I didn't want to be an Air Force psychologist. I didn't want to do this and that. And it changed my trajectory really, because after that day and knowing how difficult it was to get into OSI, I planned everything to try and make myself as marketable as possible to get into OSI. So uh-huh. I quit my job coaching gymnastics, and I applied to be a student aide with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department. And luckily I got that job, and I started working with the criminal analyst there. And I was making photo lineups for the detectives and, learning a lot more about law enforcement. And I'm not sure if that's also when I went ahead and added my emphasis in law and criminal behavior, but it was, just psychology. And then I kind of, started to shape everything towards that goal of getting into OSI, right?
Right. And it seems to me in talking to other special agents within the command, Colonel, that psychology does play a major part in investigations and things along that line. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I think that it actually helps me too as a leader, because I find all that stuff very interesting, right? I've continued to read books like Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. And I love the Howard Ross stuff and unconscious bias. And I think unconscious bias is important as an investigator as it is a leader, right? So uh-huh. Those sort of things and that love of psychology, I think helps as an investigator and also as an Air Force officer.
Right. Now, and again, referencing your biography, the next year in 2004 is when you went into the Special Investigations Academy for OSI, and then that's where I guess the ball really got rolling for you, because you've had a very eclectic OSI career since then. You've done a lot of amazing things. It must give you a lot of satisfaction knowing that your career began at such a good trajectory for you in the future.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So it was actually interesting. I think it almost really started in college, because in ROTC, again, they had a program specifically between your junior and senior year in the summer mm-hmm. that you were applied for. And I applied for Ops Air Force OSI. And, and I got that, right? So I think that was summer of 2022. And I felt super lucky. I got Aviano Air Base, Italy. So, I'm in college and I'm, traveling to Italy. Right. And I got to shadow OSI agents there. And it's kind of interesting because that was when I was introduced to counterintelligence as well. Since I had a secret clearance, they went ahead and let me look at the blue line and do all that sort of stuff. And
right.
I honestly I guess I didn't even realize that was probably somewhat of an interview, my time there. And in the end, it was at the time Major Givens, but who became General Givens, I guess, who actually then wrote the recommendation for me to come into OSI. So,
yeah, General Givens.
That's a pretty good start.
For our novice listeners out there, General Givens became one of our commanders at OSI. So that definitely was a great step for your career, no doubt about that. Now, when you began your career with OSI, did you find there were any challenges that you faced once you became a member of the command, and if so, how did you overcome them?
Absolutely. So I think it's overwhelming coming straight into OSI. So even though, I was a military family and, kind of knew about the Army a little bit, I didn't know how an Air Force wing was run. Right. And so just little silly things like, getting the first sergeant's roster to know what phone numbers to call and silly things like that. Right. Just seemed overwhelming as a 21-year-old coming in trying to start out, because I wasn't just learning how to be an investigator and how to be an officer. I was learning the Air Force and the structure, and it was everything all at the same time, right?
And I would imagine too, ma'am, that was all the terminology involved. So you have to. It's a completely different mindset, almost, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. And looking back, I guess I was a little bit jealous of the people now I am, right, of staff sergeants or people who cross-trained, because they at least understood how the Air Force worked, right? Right. And that, I just had no idea. Just somebody says, hey, call a first sergeant, and at that time, like, I don't even really know what a first sergeant is. Right. And I think one of the first cases that they actually had me just assist on, right? I wasn't the main case agent or anything. I was kind of just shadowing the other agent doing it. Was a WAPS compromise case. And as somebody who had just graduated from college, I was like, people are getting in trouble for studying for a test. I'm kind of confused. Right. So I just remember there was a lot of things that I had to learn and kind of overcome and really get on board with. It's funny to think back at how little I knew when I first started.
Oh, sure. I would imagine it was a tremendously eye-opening experience for you. But again, that's one of the great things, I guess, about OSI is the challenges that many that either cross-train or come directly into OSI face. It's a job that requires you to really have a good focus on, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that's kind of the good thing about being an investigator, right? We're curious, we're interested in things. So you just tackle, you jump into anything and you just try and tackle whatever is in front of you, right? Move the obstacles out of the way and just figure it out. Sure.
Now, Colonel, who or what inspires you to do your best in OSI?
That's a good question.
Or did your inspiration maybe begin maybe with your parents who were in the military? Because a lot of people say that, we allowed to give credit to mom and dad for a lot of things.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I'd say absolutely. I mean, there's so many things in my career and my life that wouldn't be the way they are without the experiences that I had as a child, and especially as an Army brat. I'd especially say, I lived in Turkey when I was in 7th grade, right? And I probably wouldn't have applied for the Foreign Area Studies program and picked Turkish if I hadn't had that experience, right? So it's kind of changed, or it's inspired my whole trajectory, right? The experiences that I had as a child.
Whereabouts in Turkey were you at, or I guess your folks were stationed there?
Yeah. So my dad was actually in a NATO position and he worked directly for a Turkish general. And so we lived in Izmir, Turkey, because it was a NATO position at the time.
Right.
And then, of course, when I come back active duty and I speak Turkish, all my assignments are in Incirlik, which is the southeastern part of Turkey, I guess what I'd say, the really exciting for our OSI job, but not the beautiful, Izmir is right on the Aegean Sea. And
sure. Well, I can certainly relate. I can certainly relate to Incirlik, man, because I was stationed there too as a broadcaster. So I know the lick very well.
That's good. Yeah. So I've been signed there twice, and I do love Incirlik, and it is pretty in its own right too. And you just have to drive a little ways to get to the Mediterranean, but
right.
It's just definitely different from Izmir. Right. So
yeah, definitely.
I would say, obviously my parents have always expected a lot and inspired greatness. And, I think now my husband, he continues to inspire me. He is amazing. And we've been doing this joint spouse career together for almost 20 years. We're both very close to getting to where we could retire, right? I'm not sure that we will retire right at 20 years, but and then with our kids as well. So I'm actually really proud that we've been able to do this together and, have a family and all that stuff. So I think it's great that I can show our kids that, mom and dad can both work and have a good career. We haven't done it all on our own. I'm not going to lie. We call it the GRF. We call it the Grandma Reaction Force that we've had to call up.
Very good.
Yeah. So sometimes they're doing deployments while we're doing deployments. So while I'm in Afghanistan, they're deploying to England or wherever we are at the time.
Right. And in checking your recent biography, ma'am, you're a two-commander family with your husband being a civil engineering squadron commander as well. So kudos to the commanders in the Vick family.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. He is definitely super busy over there at Kunsan, the CE commander there. The infrastructure is just falling apart. So I know that it's not an easy job to have. Everybody hates CE there because he'll call in the morning and we talk for only about like 5 minutes because it's like midnight his time, but he'll be like, the water boiler just went out here, and now these people don't have hot water for showers.
Yeah. That's definitely a challenge, no doubt about that. It kind of shifting gears just a tad here, ma'am. We go from inspiration to, say, gratification. And before we get into the question, you mentioned something in an email to me before we went on the air that you said the most gratifying part of the job has evolved for you over the years. Could you kind of expound on that a little bit for our listeners?
So I'd say, when I was younger, it was obviously more me-centric, right? I don't want to say it was like selfish, but in that sort of way, right? It was all about what I was doing in my cases and running them and having success at my own small level, right? And now, obviously, it's continuing to do well and have good results, but it's mentoring other agents and putting them in for awards and seeing them succeed. And that is absolutely the best. And I would say as I've gotten older, that is so much more gratifying than even the personal success, right?
Sure.
So while you may have gotten a conviction or you said like, hey, I had a really great source, I had all these wonderful, drug cases, we cleared up, the drug problem at this base. When you do it on a bigger scale, it's so much better, right? And it's kind of hard to explain that until you experience it. Some people will equate it to, it's something kind of like having kids, right? I'm not going to say that my office is like having children, right?
Right.
But it's, kind of that same sort of pride. So if you haven't been a leader, then it'd be something akin to that, right?
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting that you can equate that to being. Of course, you have children yourself, ma'am. I believe, and you and your husband, and so you like to feel like you can nurture your teammates on the job. You can nurture the children. So I guess the taking care of the folks that you're responsible for is a job that really is a 24/7 duty.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the amazing part about the military, right? We are a family because we do deploy, and that it's hard to stay at the home station and take care of the home front. So you're calling the spouses and ensuring that everything's okay. And, they don't have a water leak that they're, trying to deal with or whatever. Right. So,
sure.
And I have a unique experience being dual military, and I have talked to some people's retirements and I've said, hey, you know what? It's a much harder to be the spouse. Like I have to do both, right? I have to deploy and also be the person that stays at home. And it's much more difficult to stay at home and take care of everything in the home front because all that is taken care of and you're just off doing your job, right? When you're deployed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a multiple hat responsibility. There is no doubt about that. Very well said, ma'am. Now, let's kind of go back in time a little bit if we can. If you could do it all over again, and I know hindsight's 2020, but if you could do it all over again, is there anything that you would change about your OSI career?
No, I wouldn't actually. I know I definitely didn't have what you would call typical OSI career path because my husband is also active duty and we always tried to stay together. Right.
Right.
The last 6 years we haven't been great at that, but that's been always our focus. Right. And I'd actually have to say my most challenging experience was my out of command experience. So once I got comfortable in OSI, Colonel Blackwell actually said it great. She is former vice commander of OSI, but at the time she was the Region 8 commander. And my husband was he got a program to get a PhD and he had gotten into Cambridge. And so there wasn't really an OSI job for me, at least not the right rank. Right. And so OSI, everybody was supportive of me doing an out of command position at that time. It kind of fit with my career and it was an XP job. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go do plans and programs. That'll be interesting. And I show up and I walk off and there's a senior master sergeant and I'm a brand new major. And he's like, hi, ma'am, so nice to meet you. You're our new director of staff. And I was like, I knew enough to know, wait, directors of staff are usually lieutenant colonels. And that's like a bigger deal.
Right. Yeah, surprise.
Right. So I was, whoa. So some people have asked me, what has been the hardest rank change? And for me, it was going from captain to major, because ever since I pinned on major, I have ended up filling what has been O5 billets. And so I'd say that transition right there was the absolute hardest. And Colonel Blackwell was absolutely right. She said, you learn the most when you're stretched, right? And you get this good breadth. And, at the time, I probably didn't really know what she meant. And I certainly did after having that job. So the first 6 months, I was like, send me back to OSI. I don't know what I'm doing.
That's
and I think I put it in my bio because it's an unusual wing, right? There's 16 different AFSCs that are on the wing staff, which is unusual because finance usually has its own squadron, logistics usually has its own squadron, and all of these things were small enough that they weren't their own squadron and that they fell under the wing staff. And I was put on G series orders and I was the commander of the wing staff agencies. So while I wouldn't change it for the world, I kind of changed your question. Sorry. That was probably the hardest job that I ever had, but it also really, really prepared me to be the best officer that I could be in the Air Force. I completely understand how a wing is run now, right? Back from when I was a second lieutenant and didn't understand what a first sergeant was, right?
Sure. Yeah, you certainly come a long way in your own personal military education when it comes to in and out of the particular job.
Yeah, I think I've had kind of a bit of that, right? Some of them have been OSI centric, like working at a combatant command in a KICA position. That is an OSI billet. But I feel like lately it's been a lot of, kind of a joint position and then back into OSI or out of command and then kind of coming back and forth.
Sure.
But
unbelievable. I know a lot of people have gone through very eclectic parts of their careers, but you have one of the more eclectic ones that I've run into. So, good on you and the way you've met that challenge and prospered within that challenge. Now, let's put on your crystal ball a little bit, if we can, for a second, ma'am. What direction do you envision OSI going into the future?
So I think OSI is going to continue to modernize, right? I think there's things that I noticed when I was younger that, if you think of something and then all of a sudden they continue to fix it, right? So when I first came in, we were moving from Cactus to I2MS, and I2MS was so slow, but I understood, it's amazing that our headquarters can see what I'm putting in immediately. But it was a drain on the agents, right? And so OSI has really done a great job of continuing to modernize and improve. And while maybe it doesn't happen as fast as you would like in the field, they actually have done it at a really wonderful speed.
Right.
And
right.
I think that that's just going to continue to happen. We're going to probably keep working towards having JWICs at hopefully at every detachment, right? That's kind of a big system that I think we need to kind of keep pushing forward and focusing on the things that we are focusing on now, right? Like counterintelligence. Right. And, I think that there's obviously going to be that continued focus on integration and preparing the battle space, right? The ACE concept and continuing to ensure that we're on tip bids and getting us in the fight and making sure that we're a part of the plans.
Right. Yeah. With as many changes that are going on around the globe these days, you have to stay one or two steps ahead of the bad guys, as you say.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that our leaders, I've never been assigned to the headquarters, which is interesting because I would think a joint spouse we probably would be, but we haven't been because of, our assignments. But so the folks that are making the decisions up there have done a really good job of, really getting us to where we need to be. And I think we'll just keep pushing forward.
Very good. And I think one of the areas, Colonel, that we're pushing forward as a command is diversity and inclusion, which is a very popular topic of late. How do you view diversity and inclusion as far as being foundational to the success of the Office of Special Investigations?
As you know, as an investigator, we have to come from all different backgrounds, especially to relate to people that we're talking to in an interview room or maybe liaisoning with, right? So, Colonel Tilo is from Samoa, right? And he was the Region 6 commander, and he created so many relationships while he was out there just from him having that background and that ethnicity, right? And that's not something that anybody else can replicate because they aren't Samoan, right?
Right.
So just having people from all different walks of life, all different experiences is critical to our job and being successful in what we do. The irony of it is I was actually going through Air War College by correspondence at the time. And, they have you write papers. And at one point it was talking about something you thought that your organization needed to do. And my paper was literally all about how OSI needed to create a D&I office that was specifically focused on diversity and inclusion. And literally, I turned in the paper and 3 days later, there's an email from the general saying, we've created a D&I office.
You had tremendous foresight, Colonel.
Right. No, not at all. Obviously they'd been working it for forever. It was just, just a small little paper, but I just thought it was really funny. I'm doing this in a vacuum and obviously our headquarters is handling it, but
yeah, timing is everything, I guess.
Yeah. Something I say to our folks all the time though is, I want a diverse team, right? I want somebody who grew up on a farm and knew how to, farm and do that stuff. And I want somebody who grew up in a city and knows trains and understands that because, who knows what situation we're going to be put in if we're deployed or we're someplace else or maybe we're even just TDY. And I want somebody that has all the different experiences on our team to be able to kind of stand up and be like, I know I can do that. Right. So, it's not just, a lot of times people talk about just race or gender and that sort of thing. And I'm like, it's not just that, it's just your background entirely, right? Just having people that have different backgrounds and grew up differently and have different skills.
Right. Yeah. They're all part of the command known as the OSI family. Now, put on your recruiting hat for a second, if you can, ma'am, and tell us what advice would you give someone who would like to join OSI?
So the first thing I'd say is stay curious. And I mean that in terms of investigating as well as your job and everything, right? Don't become jaded. Don't, think, oh, I've seen this before, right? The whole thing is that everything is new. Look at everything that's walking is a new adventure and stay curious and really dig in, right? And it's the same thing as, our key phrase is saying have a hunter mindset, right?
Sure.
So I'm just saying it in a different way.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And that curiosity served you well when you began your OSI career too.
Right. And there's so many things that I would tell people when they're coming in. Obviously, communication is critical, right? Just continue to communicate and talk to people. There's so many things that can be fixed with good communication. What I'd tell people as soon as I take command of a detachment is like, I don't know what's going on in your life unless you tell me, right? So if there is something happening with you and you need to take leave, you need time, just tell us, right? And that's the biggest thing, is just communicate what is going on with you that is maybe preventing you from doing your best, or whatever is happening at that moment, right? The other things I'd say are, never stop innovating. Don't necessarily accept the status quo if the status quo isn't working. If it's working, fine. But, that's the whole accelerate, change, or fail, right? Mm-hmm. So we need to continue to innovating, or fail forward, as the saying is, as well. And then the final thing I think I would tell somebody is, work will always be there. And so make sure that you maintain a good work-life balance with your family. It's easy to kind of let work take over. So you need to make sure that you continue to maintain that balance, take your leave, recharge, do what you need to do. And I know it's kind of funny right now in the COVID world where everything's virtual and people are like, well, I'm at home, but it's like, well, you are, but you're also, take leave and actually like disconnect and do stuff with your family, go camping, so those are the things that I would say, because it can be stressful and overwhelming, and taking care of your mental health is extraordinarily important, right, in this job, because sometimes I think we forget how much bad things, or that's not a very articulate way to say it. We see a lot of the bad in the Air Force, rather than the good,
which is a part of the skill sets that special agents have to deal with. Right.
And so it's interesting. I was just talking to our digital forensics consultant flight chief yesterday, and I was like, hey, should we bring in the chaplain and kind of just make everybody go in there, right? Schedule the time. And he's like, well, we have to talk to the, psychologist once a year. And I was like, I get it, but
Right. Very good. Very good. Colonel, before we wrap things up today, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
What I'd say is, if you're looking at a career in law enforcement, OSI is unique and special. You get to dabble in a lot of different things in OSI that you might not necessarily get to do in just regular law enforcement, right? And it's definitely a very rewarding experience. And if that's what you're into, I would highly recommend it.
Okay. Our guest has been Lieutenant Colonel Tasha Vick, commander of the 12th Field Investigations Squadron at Buckley Space Force Base, Colorado. Colonel, thanks again for taking the time to be with us. It was so enjoyable to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
And thanks to all of you listening for tuning in. For OSI Today, my OSI Journey, I'm Wayne Amon saying so long for now.